The final chapter of Prince Harry's very public legal and emotional feud with the British state, with the press, and most painfully with his own family, seems to have played out in the last couple of days. On Friday, the Court of Appeal ruled yet again that Harry doesn't qualify for automatic taxpayer-funded security when visiting the UK. He responded with a scathing interview, a blistering written statement, and another plea for reconciliation. What the court didn't do was to say whether or not he was able to pay for his own security. And that was something he offered, and it's something that I think is a compromise resolution which might sort out so much. The newspapers have responded in kind, with exasperation, sympathy, mockery, and in some corners a sense of tragic inevitability. There's no point continuing to fight anymore, said Harry, while continuing to fight. He aired grievances old and new in an interview with the BBC, describing the court's decision as a good old-fashioned establishment stitch-up, a phrase you can almost hear echoing across a Californian vineyard. The irony, of course, was not lost on Fleet Street. Reconciliation, the press notes, doesn't begin with a fresh media ambush. But the point is, if Harry kept silent, the media would speculate and the same stuff would come out. Coverage across the Times, the Telegraph, the Mail framed the interview as self-defeating. Scorched earth, one insider called it. Deluded, another courtier reportedly muttered. Headlines spoke of a man who had lost a court case and then decided to lose public sympathy too. And the king, recovering from cancer, was dragged into the fray. I don't know how much longer my father has, said Harry, a comment described as in particularly poor taste. But I've listened to this interview and it doesn't seem particularly aggressive or calculated to hurt. It's not necessarily well advised, but that is Harry. He's vulnerable, he's open, and he doesn't speak in this sort of coded language. The battle is bureaucratic at its core. RAVEC, the executive committee that determines VIP protection, downgraded Harry's status after his royal exit in 2020. Harry's team argues this puts him, Meghan, and their children at risk. But the court ruled that grievance is not a legal battle for a legal basis for restoration, and as Sir Geoffrey Voss notes, it was an understandable and predictable reaction to Harry's withdrawal from public duties. Understandable, predictable, but wrong. Morally wrong. And Harry claimed his father won't speak to him because of this security stuff. Again, who is the father here? There isn't a point at which you say, this is no longer my son. That isn't, we're not in the 19th century. And more than that, there has to be a principle where the king leads as the head of the royal family, and that he demonstrates what the right thing to do is. This sort of fracture in his family is wrong, and it sends the wrong message. And palace insiders insist it's not about security at all, it's about trust. And as one courtier put it, how can the king speak to his son in confidence when anything might end up on the BBC? And the press reflected this consensus. Reconciliation, if it were ever plausible, now seems permanently lost in transmission. I think this is a conclusion which has been drafted by somebody, and it's now become an easy statement that Harry is garrulous. And Harry's language is at times heartbreakingly emotive, referring to Archie and Lilibet as my father's grandchildren and lamenting they may never see the UK again. But this grief is wrapped in accusation. Look where the responsibility lies, he says. All but laying future blame at the palace gates should harm come to his family. This, the Times says, isn't so much a plea for peace as a warning shot. But I think he's right. When someone like Liz Truss commands security protection wherever she goes, and Prince Harry, who has had direct threats against him, doesn't, I don't understand. Perhaps the most provocative moment came when Harry suggested that there are those who want history to repeat itself. A veiled reference to Diana's tragic fate. He didn't elaborate, but he didn't need to. The implication was chilling. And maybe offensive to many people in the royal household. Even tabloid commentators who once sympathised with Harry found this suggestion too dark, too conspiratorial, too Californian. All this, of course, comes in the long shadow of Spare, Harry's memoir, that eviscerated family members by name, detail and anecdote. Trust, as the Queen once put it delicately, may vary. While Harry insists he wants reconciliation, the press response is brutally sceptical. This is not what reconciliation looks like, wrote one commentator. Indeed, one could argue it's what scorched earth diplomacy looks like. Maybe he's been learning from Trump. A YouGov poll taken after the ruling showed that 46% of the British public believe Harry has been treated fairly by the royal family. Only 23%, and I'm in the 23%, think he's been treated unfairly. Sympathy is draining. Even Harry's wistful claim, "I love my country, I miss the UK," was met with a stiff upper lip. The UK doesn't miss Harry so much. Yes, I think the UK does. This isn't about popularity, this is about honour and right and duty and family. And there was, however, one line that sealed the media's verdict on this saga. When asked who he believes wants him in harm's way, Harry says, "I'm not going to share at this point." At this point. And that pause, that implication of future revelation, struck the press as proof that the wounds are not closing, they're being curated. A family tragedy is becoming a public performance, and as the monarchy rallies around VE Day commemorations, one headline summed it up best: the Prince of Wales, WAILS. Well, maybe, but I think Prince Harry has plenty to wail about, and I'm afraid I don't change my view. I think he's been treated appallingly.